G'day and welcome to episode 16 of Travel Pointers, the Australian podcast for frequent flyers. It's the 4th of August 2025 and I'm Matt Green, the editor of Australian Frequent Flyer.
And I'm Wilson McTaggart, a writer at AFF and part of the Frequent Flyer concierge team.
Well, coming up in this episode, after months of building a detailed model to calculate the average value of a frequent flyer point, AFF has released its first ever point valuations. Wilson and I developed this model together and we'll explain later in the episode exactly how the model works, which frequent flyer programs came out on top, which flopped, and why. And Wilson, that wasn't the only thing that AFF released since our last podcast, was it?
Yeah, that's right, Matt. If you've been on the AFF website over the past few days, you may have noticed that it has a completely new look and feel. So firstly, AFF does have a completely new logo. Yes, it does look a bit like Finnair's.
That wasn't intentional, was it?
No, not at all.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like Finnair Down Under merging with Bonza, but I know that wasn't really what was intended. It's really an upside, like a plane taking off in the shape of an F, like for AFF, isn't it?
Yeah, it's maybe a bit of interpretation required, but that's okay. That's art, isn't it? You'll also see a new colour scheme, a new homepage, and new article design as well. For now, though, the forum itself has only had cosmetic changes. There's no changes whatsoever to the functionality of it.
Yeah, and as with all IT changes, especially when it's a major change like this, I'm sure there were absolutely no bugs and everyone loved the changes the first time they saw them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There was nothing whatsoever went wrong and everything went perfectly well. Everyone was super happy, I'm sure.
So what actually happened?
Oh, of course, there was a few little issues, but we're working through it, and you can post on the specific thread for feedback if you do notice an issue or you just want to share your thoughts.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people did share their thoughts. Look, of course, with any change, some people are going to be happy, some people are not going to be so happy. We have read, and the IT team is reading all of the feedback and taking it on board, and we are making some changes, of course, to the site based on that feedback. But yeah, bear with us. The site will be in definitely in a better shape than it was before the changes once all of this process has been completed. So yeah, thanks for your patience on that, and I hope you do like the new look and feel of the website. Now, before we get to our main discussion topic for this episode, just a few headlines from the last couple of weeks since we last recorded. Now, firstly, Qantas has increased the points that you earn on Qantas domestic flights by 25%, and it's also removed the status bonus cap for all Qantas American Airlines and Jetstar flights, which means that if you've booked a premium economy, business or first class ticket on Qantas American or Jetstar, and you also have silver or higher status on Qantas, you'll now earn more points. This was something that Qantas announced back in January that it was going to implement in July. However, it's good news and bad news. From tomorrow, Qantas will increase the number of points you need to book a classic flight reward or an upgrade, and the carrier charges on Qantas operated flights in premium cabins are also going to go up to the higher Classic Plus levels. So that is implemented on the 5th of August. This episode is being released on the 4th of August, so that means that if you're listening to this on the day that the podcast was released, and if you've subscribed, then hopefully you are. You should have been notified as soon as the podcast was released. It means you have until the end of today to lock in any last-minute Qantas redemptions at the current lower pricing. Unfortunately, though, if it's the 5th of August or later when you're listening to this, then it's a little bit too late, and we hope that you got in before the changes. Now, one of the questions that's come up on the forum, Wilson, is whether you can book now at the lower pricing and then change your reward booking at a later date and still keep the low pricing if you either haven't been able to lock in your dates yet or whatever. Now, is this something that is this going to work?
Yeah, Matt. So Qantas says on its website that you can make changes to existing bookings, which will then keep the old pricing. So that's bookings made prior to the 5th of August. This includes normal bookings and One World Classic reward. Now, Qantas hasn't actually said specifically what changes you can make. So it could be you're allowed to just change dates, or you might be able to change entire routings. We're not 100% sure.
No, I'm not sure either, but I'm sure that once someone has tested this, they will post their findings on the AFF forum, and I'll be keeping an eye out on that. Now, in some good news though, Qantas now offers fast free Wi-Fi on its Trans-Tasman flights. So this has obviously been rolled out on domestic flights for a long time, but it now works across the Tasman as well. There's just like a few minutes where the network goes out of coverage when the plane crosses out of Australian airspace and over the ocean, while it switches from a ground-based network to a satellite network. But yeah, we tried this recently, Wilson, and the Wi-Fi actually worked really well. So nice to see. Velocity has invited a select group of its top frequent flyers as well to trial Platinum Plus status ahead of its launch on the 1st of October this year. Now, as a reminder, Velocity announced last year this new tier. It's a top tier above Platinum. It's Platinum Plus, where you need 2,000 status credits in a year to earn it, including at least 1,500 on Virgin Australia flights. And it's kind of Velocity's answer to Qantas's Platinum 1 status, which, if you've been reading the forum now, has a different colour scheme, and which I'm sure will be interesting to not that many people, but to a select few, very interesting. Now, the benefits of Platinum Plus status will include things like the ability to use the complimentary business class upgrades from economy choice fares instead of just flex fares, fly later, kind of the opposite of fly ahead, higher luggage allowance, VIP phone service, and the ability to gift Velocity Platinum status, which is something that you can currently do if you have Platinum status and earn enough extra status credits in your year. And yeah, select group of Velocity members have been invited to test out the new status tier ahead of the launch, and I'm sure that that'll give them a chance as well to iron out any bugs, and maybe the people doing the trial might be able to make also some suggestions on other benefits that Velocity might be able to include in that tier. Now, ahead of the program changes that are coming in October, some Velocity program members, unfortunately, have been surprised to learn that they will lose their status at their next review date, even though they've requalified for their status under the current rules, which would have been in place before the changes take effect. Now, from the 1st of October, as a reminder, instead of the Velocity sector requirement, Velocity is replacing that with a requirement to earn at least 50% of your status credits from Virgin Australia flights that you have personally flown, and which is for most people a more onerous requirement than the sector requirement. Now, there's a whole lot of people who have a review date on or after the 1st of October this year who would have already, before the changes come into effect, requalified for their existing status tier under the current rules. But once the review date comes around after the 1st of October, Velocity is going to be assessing your status credits based on the new requirements. So even if you would have requalified under the old requirements before the changes came into effect, that's actually not relevant here. And a few people have been caught out by that. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, or if you're interested in learning what you can do to kind of get around that, there is an article on the AFF forum that you can read. How much is a frequent flyer point worth? Well, answering that question is a bit like asking how long's a piece of string, because the value of a point really depends on how you use it. Like, for example, if you were to use a Qantas point or a Velocity point for a gift card, for the supermarket, you could probably be getting less than half a cent per point worth of value. But if you were to redeem for a business class redemption flight to Asia, for example, from Australia, you could be getting, 3 or even more than 3 cents per point in value. So a lot more value from each point. And for that reason, it's kind of hard to compare. I guess, firstly, it's hard to put a valuation on a frequent flyer point. And I mean, of course, the valuations are kind of intentionally murky on behalf of the airlines. But also, it's really hard to compare. If you've got different frequent flyer programs, how do you know which one has the most valuable points? Well, AFF set out to do that. Wilson and I developed from the ground up quite detailed and sophisticated model using sort of basic economic principles on valuing frequent flyer points in different programs. Now, there were definitely some challenges with this, and to give you an example as well, there might be a redemption that's really valuable with a program like Qantas Frequent Flyer, but it's really hard to actually find availability on that particular route or with that partner airline. And so our model kind of takes all of this kind of stuff into account. Wilson, do you want to explain, the approach that we took and firstly how the model works?
Sure, Matt. So the way we sort of approached this was we wanted to take a large basket of redemptions that Australians would typically make using their points, sort of how economists calculate inflation, or maybe how like an index fund is created. So the basket of redemptions encompass both redemptions that you'd make both on the ground, so like gift cards or maybe hotel stays, and then also on flights themselves. We then calculated the cent per point value of each redemption using the actual cost of the reward redemption, so either a flight reward or, in the case of the gift card, the whatever price the airline charges for in points. We then compared these point redemptions to an equivalent cash redemption. So for airfares, we used the equivalent off-peak airfare. For cash redemptions or like a hotel stay, we used the equivalent hotel stay. And then we also made sure to account for the actual taxes and charges on the redemption. We then removed outliers. So we created what's called a trimmed mean, which means we took the highest value and the lowest value for each program and effectively took them out to make sure no like really large or really small outliers majorly impacted the valuation. And then we took the average value of the remaining items. We then applied weightings. So weightings we thought were very relevant to redeeming your points. So these weightings were network and reward flight availability, redemption experience, consistent redemption pricing, so award chart changes, points expiration policy, and the ease of earning points in Australia. And so then, depending on how a program did in these weightings, it would affect the value of the points by plus or minus 20%.
Yeah, exactly. So we it's really a mathematical approach. Like we did take the actual sort of cents per point value of each redemption, but then also we've applied some qualitative analysis. So yeah, with those weightings, like because if you have a really good program, but the points expire after a week, not that there's any that expire after a week, but you get my point, like it would impact the value, the likelihood that you're actually going to get the value of the points that we've calculated. So that's that approach. What's actually in the basket of goods, so to speak, that we used as a basis for our valuations?
Yeah, so we had 16 total redemptions used in our basket. Gift card was one of them, a hotel stay another. Then we used a bunch of short haul, long haul, economy and business class redemptions to make up our total of 16, along with upgrades to business class and a points plus pay booking for good measure. But which program came out best? Find out after this short break.
There are quite a lot of popular forums on the Australian Frequent Flyer Forum. Certainly the Qantas Frequent Flyer Forum gets a lot of views, as well as for some reason, the Wine Forum. This is a bit of a surprise, but there's quite a strong wine forum community on AFF. One of the other most popular forums is the Trip Reports, and this is there's some really high quality, well-written trip reports on AFF that are entertaining, where you can read about trips that people have done, get some tips on airlines, on destinations, and see lots of interesting photos from people's trips. Now, we also on AFF award the best trip report each month with a title of Trip Report of the Month, and the winner for August, congratulations, is BPB. Now, at the end of the year as well, we'll basically create a list of all of the winners of the Trip Report of the Month, and AFF members can vote on their favourite one to win Trip Report of the Year. Now, if you are interested in reading some of those trip reports, definitely check out the Trip Reports forum, and especially the Trip Report of the Month winners. They're really, really interesting, high-quality trip reports. You can get a lot of great tips as well. And of course, if you're interested in writing a trip report, I'm sure AFF members would love to read it. So head over to the Trip Reports forum to see more. So of the 12 frequent flyer programs that we analysed, Virgin Atlantic Flying Club, now Virgin Atlantic is based in the UK, not to be confused with Velocity, but Virgin Atlantic Flying Club came out on top with an average value, this is in Australian cents per, of 2.1 cents per point. This was followed by Qatar Airways Privilege Club, 2 cents a point, and Cathay, which had a valuation of 1.9 cents per Asia mile. And just for completeness, the Other airlines that we considered in descending order were Air France, KLM Flying Blue, Air Canada Aeroplan, Qantas and Virgin were then next in the middle, followed by Chris Flyer, Singapore Airlines, United Mileage Plus, then Emirates Skywards, Etihad Guest, and in very last place was Air New Zealand Airpoints with a quite deserved loss, I would say. Now, firstly, Wilson, why were Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Airways, and Cathay Pacific ranked the highest? What was so good about them?
The biggest thing and easiest thing to make these points more valuable is that they actually had very valuable redemptions across the board. So they had specifically very high value redemptions in both Virgin Atlantic and Qatar. I think the highest value redemption was on Virgin Atlantic with, I think, around 7 cents per point, which is pretty insane. But also they performed quite well in our weighting criteria. They got boosted quite well because they have good availability, the redemption experience is not too bad, and their points don't expire, or it's definitely not as punitive as some other programs.
And when you say like high value redemptions, I guess we're talking about the number of points that you need to book a redemption flight is really quite low.
Yeah, that's right. So it means that you can really get good value for your points.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have, for example, points in a credit card program that you can transfer at exactly the same rate, usually 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or whatever it is, to your choice of programs like Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Airways, Cathay, Emirates, Etihad, I guess it means that like these valuations are really useful for like actually highlighting which is the best programs to actually redeem to transfer your points into.
Yeah, that's right, and obviously you have to make sure that there is availability through the program that you want to book. You don't just automatically transfer to the one that's got the highest value, but it does show that across the board, because we tested so many different redemptions, that you can, on average, get higher value for your points if you transfer to programs like Virgin Atlantic or Qatar Airways.
And that's kind of the key. Like, we are looking at the averages here. Now, a lot of people on the Australian Frequent Flyer commented that they didn't think Singapore Airlines Chris Flyer deserved to be sort of towards the bottom. What's it, number 8? Is that 9? It's number 7 in our chart? Yeah. So they came 7th out of 12. A lot of AFF members and frequent flyers generally believe that Chris Flyer miles are more valuable than Qantas points and Velocity points. And to be honest, before we did this analysis, I also would have said that. Now, I guess the thing to remember here, though, is that this is just an average valuation based on the items that are in our basket. And this is based definitely this is like Australia focused. So we have like a fair few Australian domestic routes in our basket. And like you can, redeem Chris Flyer miles on Virgin Australia on Australian domestic flights. But the number of miles is kind of high relative to the airfare. And so they just kind of weighted down a little bit. And I guess the thing to remember as well is like the value, I guess the value in Chris Flyer is the good business class award availability to Asia and Europe and other places. And I mean, you can still, if you are actually redeeming your Chris Flyer miles for those kinds of redemptions, you can still get, really good value and more value than what we've got as the average in our chart.
Yeah, that's right. So Chris Flyer is a great program for some or more like specific routes, especially, as you said, to business class to Asia and Europe. And for that, it's great. But for economy class or for using partner airlines in certain cases, it's maybe not as good value. So it is important to take into consideration that just because, I guess, you fly or you want to fly business class to Europe, it may not be the best for everyone. But it is still important to use your points. The best way to waste a point is to not use it, so you can still get half decent value, even if it's not the most optimal redemption.
Yeah, and Chris Flyer did get a very good rating. So basically, in our weightings, for each of the categories, we have given each program a rating based on very basically objective criteria of either very good, good, average, poor, or very poor. Chris Flyer did get the absolute best possible rating for availability, which was also the criteria which had the highest weight in our waiting are very good. So definitely, like, the availability on KrisFly is definitely not something to be sneezed at. However, the number of miles you actually need for a redemption, when you really look at KrisFlyer versus other programs, is actually not that low. Like, and especially now that a lot of credit card points transfer into KrisFlyer at 3-to-1 rather than 2-to-1 into other programs like Velocity. The availability is great and all that, but KrisFlyer does have a hard 3-year expiry on its points, and yeah, the outside of specific pockets of value, and I have certainly my favorite KrisFlyer redemptions that I keep using over and over because they are really good value, but not everything is actually good value. Now, another surprise for me, to be honest, was the quite poor value in some of the programs we looked at when redeeming your points to fly to Europe.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess a lot of points miles enthusiasts, maybe friends or on AFF as well, we definitely say long-haul business class is the best way to redeem your points. And I mean, for a lot of people, it obviously serves them quite well. It's a pretty good way to fly, and you can do it using your points. But in pure cents per point value, Qantas, for the route that we tested, which is Sydney to Frankfurt in business class, sorry, that's return, Qantas only returned a cents per point value of 2.12 cents per point, which, like, it's still not bad, but it's not like outrageously good. Velocity was slightly higher for the same route, which was 2.27 cents per point value, and it definitely surprised us both. The reason why is pretty straightforward. Both Qantas and Velocity charge a lot of points for their long haul redemptions in business class. So for Qantas, it's at the moment it's 159,000 one way, so 318,000 return.
What's it going to be from tomorrow?
Yeah, from tomorrow it's going to be 365,800 Qantas points returned to Europe for one person in business class.
That's a lot of points, actually.
Yeah, especially when you factor in the taxes and fees as well, which is like not unreasonable, that's for sure.
Yeah, and like we did also factor in, as you say, the carrier charges. And I mean, with Qantas Frequent Flyer, I think the particular redemption that we looked at in our model for Sydney to Frankfurt, we basically just used the best one that was available, and it was Japan Airlines through Tokyo. The carrier charges are not insignificant. If Emirates would have been used, that would have taken off $4,000 off the value of the redemption, because that's how much you're paying in taxes and carrier charges as well. And I mean, if you have a look at the programs that got the best ratings, like Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Airways, and Cathay, the number of points or miles you need in those programs to redeem for business class to Europe, which you actually can do because each of those programs has pretty good availability as well on those routes, Australia to Europe via certain stopover points. The number of points and miles you need is way less.
Yeah, that's right. So Cathay is probably best example for a Australia to Europe redemption, and that only requires 220,000 Asia miles return for business class, and the carrier charges are relatively reasonable as well. So it's just a much better redemption than either Qantas or Velocity. But of course, the trouble is getting those miles first.
Yeah, and I mean, with Cathay Pacific as well, there's actually good availability in business, and I mean, with Qatar Airways, it's 180,000 Avios returned for business class from Australia to Europe as well. Very good. But yes, you're completely right. Like, it's one thing to say, okay, Virgin Atlantic is the best program, but unless you're earning, points with American Express or with a credit card program that you can easily transfer your points into Flying Club, it is a lot easier indeed for most Australians to earn larger amounts of Qantas points and Velocity points. So that's also a consideration.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously for those who can't or maybe don't want to use credit cards, Qantas and Velocity offer a lot of different ways to earn points in Australia, while other programs, it's a bit harder to accumulate those points and therefore take advantage of those higher value redemptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, at the bottom of the rankings, as I mentioned before, we have Air New Zealand with its Air Points program. Air New Zealand's Air Points program kind of sucks, doesn't it? It's
not my first choice. In fact, it is probably my last choice to go to. It's basically a cashback scheme, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah, and I'm really sorry to anyone from Air New Zealand who might be listening. I love your airline. I think your cabin crew are great. I like your planes. Your Air Points program, though, is just not competitive. I mean, the only reason I can think of that you would really be a member of that is if you live in New Zealand and mostly do just domestic flying in New Zealand or don't really fly that much at all. And in that case, it's just the kind of the logical program to use because Air New Zealand kind of has a bit of a monopoly in New Zealand. I'm a member of dozens and dozens of frequent flyer programs. I have never joined Air Points. My family members in New Zealand are members of Air Points, and I've helped them to redeem their Air Points before for redemptions, and I just really wasn't impressed. Like, for example, to actually, use the Air Points, you're basically just using one Air Points dollar towards $1 of an airfare. But you have to have the full, even though it's basically treated like cash, you still have to have the full amount of Air Points to cover the actual cost of the ticket before you can make the booking. If you want to use like half of the Air Points towards your booking, Air New Zealand charges a fee for that. And you still have to pay the taxes using cash. You can't use Air Points for that. So they're actually kind of worse than cash in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the expiry period like as well?
Yeah, they have a hard 4-year expiry. So basically, you can't keep the balance extended with activity. After 4 years, 4 years after you've earned them, they use timestamping, the points expire. Now, there is a little bit of value with some of the Star Alliance partner airline redemptions. Like if you're booking a point-to-point, long-haul business class flight, or not really long haul, they're actually quite expensive, like sort of a mid-haul business or first class flight on a Star Alliance partner airline, like maybe a transatlantic flight in business class, that can actually be reasonable value. Like there is fixed pricing in their charts for that. But Air New Zealand, for some reason, uses kilometers to calculate the distance in its partner airline reward chart. Pretty much every other airline that has a distance-based chart uses miles. So using kilometers, it seems to just kind of obscure the value, and obviously a kilometer is shorter than a mile, so it means that you're having to pay more. And on multi-stop itineraries as well, you have to pay for every single flight in the itinerary separately as well. So that, especially if you're flying to Europe on a multi-stop itinerary, you're going to be paying through the nose for that. And just to give you an example, like if you're flying Perth to London in economy class, you would need over 2,000 Air Points dollars plus having to pay all of the taxes to fly on like Singapore Airlines in economy on an airfare that would otherwise cost around $1,600. So not good value at all. And Emirates and Etihad as well were in our bottom three.
Yeah, they didn't do very well, especially with the weightings. The value you can get out of the programs isn't fantastic to begin with. Emirates in particular is pretty much only useful for upgrades out of Australia because of the ridiculously high carrier charges it has on its awards. Upgrades are a niche sort of use of it, but because of the way we did our model, which removed like the highest and lowest value, that value wasn't counted at all. But the points themselves in both Etihad and Emirates are points programs, that it's pretty punitive. Like for Etihad, you have to, is it a flight every 12 months to keep your points alive?
I think it might be you have to take a flight every 18 months and credit it to Etihad Guest or something like that. But that sucks, frankly.
Yeah, especially since flying Etihad for Australians at least pretty much means a very, very long haul flight somewhere.
I think you can credit a partner airline flight, but they've actually just cut their partnership with Virgin Australia. So the easiest way to do that is now gone. I guess overall, what is the lesson out of all of this? Well, I think there's a few things. Firstly, I think it shows that there is value in overseas programs that you might not have otherwise considered. There's definitely pockets of value. And I guess it also shows the value of collecting points in a flexible credit card reward program such as American Express Membership Rewards, which lets you transfer points to a whole lot of different overseas programs, including the top 3 on our list. So that, rather than just earning points with, say, Qantas or Velocity, if you have the option to use one of those, flexible credit card programs, is definitely worthwhile. You can get a lot more value out of the points when it comes time to redeem them. But at the end of the day, I mean, Qantas and Velocity didn't come out badly in these rankings. It's just that they're not the best, but they're also not the worst.
Only thing I will note is that Qantas, of course, will increase their point cost by about 15 to 20% on some routes, obviously tomorrow, and so this will affect our valuations for Qantas as well. So, yeah, stay tuned for the update to this.
Yeah, and we will periodically update the values and release the new numbers. So yeah, it'll be an interesting way to keep the airlines to account as well with their frequent flyer programs. Now, of course, you can see the full valuations on the Australian Frequent Flyer website. Just look for the AFF Point Valuations, and of course, there is a link in the episode notes as well as links to the other topics we've discussed on this episode. We'll see you again next time, and happy flying.
Thanks for listening.